John 18:33 to 38 and chapter 19, verses 4 to 16. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you've done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. With this he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him." Once more Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify! Crucify!" But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." The Jewish leaders insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God." When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you're no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about noon. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, "Take him away! Take him away! Crucify him!" "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priests answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified.
With Annas, of course, it was a question of the threat to his way of life. To Pilate, it was the application and implication of kingship. If Jesus had a claim to a throne, then Pilate's position was under threat. King was a political title that was enjoyed only by Herod the Great in Judea. So is Jesus making a political challenge with this word? Notice Jesus accepts the title, but of course he redefines it. His kingdom is otherworldly. But if Pilate is concerned about Jesus' status concerning kingship, But if Pilate is concerned about Jesus' status as king, then the Jews' next accusation leaves him positively quaking. Jesus has claimed to be the Son of God. Pilate's question now is, where are you from? He's probing, isn't he, the identity of Jesus. And this conversation finishes with Pilate desperate to release Jesus. But as Pilate, readies himself to come outside, raised voices meet him. A new threat is hurled at him, and his stamina disappears. If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Ouch. You see, friend of Caesar was a technical term meaning loyal to Caesar. And it referred, didn't it, to those who'd had distinguished themselves in imperial service. It guaranteed, didn't it, a good career. And now Pilate has to decide, choose between this new king and Caesar. Actually, he chooses Jesus and goes through the motions of making a judicial edict. But the decision between Caesar and the King Jesus, weighed first by Pilate, is now decided by the chief priests. Shall I crucify your king? Now leads the chief priests to utter words of blasphemy, when falling from the lips of those who worship the God of Israel. That's what it is, isn't it? Blasphemy. We have no king but Caesar. Pilate seems very much to have been the pawn in the hands of the chief priests. And Jesus tells him that he who delivered me to you has the greater sin. And even Pilate's fear, on one level, seems unreasonable. After all, it was only one man, unless he was grasping something of the man standing before him. Annas, Caiaphas seem to see Jesus as a nuisance. Pilate is deeply troubled. And let's not forget the warning of his wife to have nothing to do with Jesus. But yes, Pilate has a choice to make. His situation may be complex, and if you were to offer him the option of Jesus being a great moral teacher, we suspect that he may have drawn that conclusion. But it was the writer C.S. Lewis who said that simply accepting Jesus as a great moral teacher, but not accepting his claim to be God, is the one thing we must not say. C.S. Lewis then adds this conclusion: you can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come up with any patronising nonsense about him being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. More of the why not in a moment. And so Pilate handed Jesus over and knowingly condemned him to death.